Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends. Thanks for tuning in today. If it's your first time, welcome, welcome. My name is Erin Bradley. I'm your host, and we are here to design a life that you don't need a vacation from. And I have an incredible example of this motto that we have here at Pursuing Freedom with Matt Drouin. And Matt is a retired and recovering real estate agent, as he was saying earlier, which I loved. And he's also a real estate investor, developer, host of the podcast Go Big. He's an incredible educator on YouTube. You can find him at Matt M. Drouin. And his story is fascinating, and I'll let him share the details. But he achieved financial freedom at the young age of 33 and then quickly fell into a depression, which is an interesting thing for us to unpack here, and found his purpose and has now gone on to live a life of purpose and inspire others to do the same. And I have no doubt that you are in the right place if you tuned in today, because I think you're going to leave here inspired and uplifted and ready to take charge of your own life and business and have fun along the way. So thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time to join us today. I'm really grateful to have you here.
Hey, I'm excited and terrified.
So, Matt, give us a little bit of the backstory, because it's a fascinating tale, and I always love to start from the beginning and figure out how you got to where you are, succeeding at such a high level, but also living a life of alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. And my background came from my family. My mother and father were blue collar, professionals. I mean, my dad was a general laborer at Genesee Brewery, doing dirty stuff like cleaning fermentation tanks and picking up and setting down heavy metal objects and that sort of thing. And my mother was a dialysis nurse. And during my childhood, I saw that there was a lot of friction between my parents due to money. All right. And in a lot of households throughout the US, talking about money is kind of a taboo issue. And then a lot of people fight over it and have different alignments that really never meet in the middle. And that was my parents. My mother wanted my dad to scale back and only work his 7 to 3 job at Genesee Brewery, and my dad wanted more, right? So he wanted to, he got his real estate license, was showing houses on nights and weekends and that sort of thing. And my mother hated it, right? And so that was the, source of that friction. And the seminal moment that happened with me that was still like sort of traumatic in my eyes was my parents were fighting about hours and time and that sort of thing. And my dad got so angry that he like smashed his fist down on the kitchen table onto a plate, and the plate just just disintegrated into like 1,000 pieces, and there were like shards of porcelain going all over the place. And I was just like, is this what a relationship and marriage looks like? Like that's like kind of like how it was trained growing up, and it was always this thing of money. That's the reason why my parents split. I lost both my parents in my 20s due to health reasons at different times, but I just remember after my mother passed away, I think I was like 21 years old, and we were at her funeral services. My dad put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You know what, Matt? I really wish I would have worked things out with your mom." And so, and I just went back to that money thing, and I just got obsessed with this idea of being financially secure. There was no thing about financial independence or financial freedom and like that. I just wanted the actual financial security, but I wanted like an abundance of financial security. So I started getting like really obsessed over Wall Street and these like Gordon Gekko cigar chomping, like rapacious capitalist types that I wanted to sort of like, have become my role models, because like those guys don't have a worry in the world, right? So I went off on my college journey. I was the first in my family to actually like attend like a 4 year school, and this was my pursuit. I was going to wind up on Wall Street. I was going to be putting huge M&A deals together. Mind you, this is like fantasy in my mind during this whole phase. And I graduated in 2006 from SUNY Geneseo. It was the height of the market in terms of like the economy. And I was out there applying for jobs in New York City and was not getting any responses back. I was applying for jobs locally, not getting any responses back. Companies just didn't want to hire a 20 something with no experience straight out of a liberal arts college, right? So the best job I could find was as a part-time bank teller at Chase Bank in the village of Pittsford. My family was always house poor, unbeknownst to me, and we lived in a affluent suburb, and they were living paycheck to paycheck. And I always had this inferiority complex of my friends going to fancy, Ivy League schools like Yale and Harvard and all that stuff. And, me getting into a state school because that's what all that we could afford. And now I was coming back, they were coming back with their fancy jobs in finance and tech and all that stuff. And I was here working part time there and part time at a liquor store, basically depositing their paycheck. And it was a deeply humbling experience and was just further my resolve in like, I need to figure this thing out. I hated that job. I was complaining to my dad a lot about it. So he extended the offer. He's like, listen, Matt, if you get your real estate license, I'll show you the ropes. I'm not going to give you any business, but I'm going to show you how the business works and how you can grow it for yourself. So that's how I became a real estate agent. Figured out that that business was not for me very early on. Too bad. I stuck through it for like nearly 11, 12 years full time. I wasn't a very good prospect or anything like that. I wasn't a salesy type of person, but my dad gave me an ultimatum after had earned some commission checks and, working part time at a liquor store to make ends meet. And it's like, hey, Matt, you got to the end of the year to move out of the house because I was living with them. Because it's like not anybody's dream to have a 20-year-old something like, adult child living at their home. So it's like you can get an apartment with your friends, or you can buy a property and, buy a multifamily property and rent out the other units. So I did that. Long story short, I bought a 4-family property, and that was when I was, bit by the bug because I moved into this thing and I magically had like $1,800 in rent checks in my mailbox. And it was like it felt almost like criminal because I knew how hard I had to work to earn $1,800 in commission checks selling like grinder city properties for $40,000. And so that was when I realized, like, yeah, maybe Wall Street wasn't my thing, but this is my ticket to securing financial independence. So I had become obsessed every single day at figuring out how to become financially independent by the time I was 40 years old. And so I just started scaling and hustling in the small multifamily space. And then one day I woke up and I realized, geez, I don't need to sell real estate anymore. I was hit that financial independence number, and this thing that I was obsessed with every single day, every waking moment of my day was achieved. And that's when I had to uh, go through the painful process of reinventing myself because I was like, what's next? What's the next thing I'm going to be obsessed with every day? And that was really kind of like that first, like probably 5 chapters of my life. And I'll let you interrogate me from there.
Well, actually, I'm curious what came of this because it's so interesting what you're saying. And, you were talking earlier about when you were a witness to those people that were finding success in the corporate world. And, you talked about looking for finance jobs and M&A and how those guys don't have a worry in the world. And it just made me chuckle because I've worked a lot with real estate professionals. And even as in my own journey, where I had achieved this level of external success, where on the outside looking in, everything looked great because I was closing a lot of transactions, I was making a lot of money, my debts were finally paid off, our savings was growing, I had 2 young kids. For all intents and purposes, everything looked great. It looked like I didn't have a worry in the world, but the reality is I was just surviving my own success. And I see that a lot in our industry where people get to that point where money's great, but they're just, trying to survive it and bear with the pace that they've created for themselves. And um it's interesting to me that, you did this, you hustled, which is great because when you're young like that and you have the energy and the stamina to just floor it until you get to that sort of destination of I'm making great money, I have achieved external success, and yet here you are saying what's next and you're longing for something different. I think is natural. I mean, I think as human beings, we have this natural inclination to expand. And you hear it with Benjamin Hardy, he talks about it in um, The Gap and the Gain, where he says, I had achieved at this high level, and yet I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. I was still missing something because I recognize that the goalpost keeps moving and you achieve something and then the goalpost moves. And almost like there's a fault to that. But I think that's just part of the human experience because you're naturally going to achieve something and you worked really hard for it. You focused, you put your nose to the grindstone, and then you get to the destination and then you pick your head up and you're like, okay, I've moored the ship to port. Now I might not be on the right island. So what happened when you started this exploration? What did that, number one, what did that even look like for you to start to go inward to awaken the path to whatever the future holds for you next?
Yeah, that's incredible insight. I mean, what it looked like for me was I had about a couple of weeks where I was just kind of, okay, I don't have to trade my time for dollars anymore. And I started this journey on my own when I was single. And at this point in time, I was married. So the further, like the doubly depression thing on this whole thing was it took me 11 years to acquire 25 income producing properties, 76 doors, to achieve my financial independence. And I was very busy doing it. And then I was looking over at my wife, who was a school teacher at Hilton High School, teaching math. And this dream I had of like going backpacking through Europe for a couple months at a time and that sort of thing wasn't going to be a thing if she was stuck with her job. So I had this like major, like, gut wrenching moment that I was like, do I have to do this thing all over again? And and it was just completely heartbreaking for me. And so I always knew that I wanted to do commercial income properties and buy larger deals. So I always had this like sort of limiting belief that I had to be big in order to go big. I had to have a certain number of units or a certain number of years of experience to get into like larger multifamily deals and high-rise office buildings, that sort of thing. And so I finally just said, like, enough is enough. Like, I just have to go forward and do it. Right. What's the worst that could happen? Right. I have to go back to work or something like that. That's fine. So I had set my sights on buying larger commercial property, and I found a commercial office building that was right near my other, properties in my portfolio, and a broker brought it to me off market, and I was able to take that deal down. It was $1 million deal, super intimidating. It was the biggest deal I'd ever done at that time, and I had to have 300,000 bucks that I didn't have because all my cash was tied up in a major rehab that I was tying up. And so this is the first time I had, was basically forced to raise capital, so to speak, from individuals to take this thing down. So I had a good business plan for the property. I took that deal down, and fast forward, I was able to refinance that property, pay all my investors back, and then that single property alone added a $500,000 to our net worth and replaced my wife's income with one deal. So at that point in time, I was just like, okay, this is my path. I can also, I was really, really big into community service when I was in school. I think I actually got a college credit based upon the amount of community service that I did. So I was like, okay, now that we're sustained, what's next? I mean, I can do all this stuff that's incredibly impactful in my community, redeveloping and repositioning properties, and that's really kind of like was my next chapter, and is what I'm into today, and just pushing the envelope on every single deal that we do in terms of its size and its complexity, just to keep myself intellectually challenged and to just satisfy my own curiosity. Like it's like, damn, that skyscraper I just absolutely love. It's a historic skyscraper. Like I just love to own that someday and, breathe new life into it. And, I'm just manifesting those things and, doing those things in my life right now in my business.
I love what you said there, that I had to keep myself intellectually challenged. We talk a lot about burnout on this show and with my coaching clients as well. And what one of the words that we also talk about is boredom. And it's so interesting because you talk about 11, 12 years selling real estate, then, financial invest, you were investing in real estate, you achieved that financial independence number, and then you're like, what's next? And then now you start dipping your toe into commercial, you find this path that gives you more freedom and then more impact. And it's so important that you are continuing to explore because it is natural. And I think people almost self-criticize for experiencing that I've achieved some mastery and now I'm here at this level of mastery. I've developed the skills, I have the experience, I have the contacts. It's not that I have a shortage of strategy. It's not like I don't know what to do to go repeat this outcome for myself. But sometimes I just don't feel like it. Like the energy is gone. The spark has been extinguished. And it's a really interesting thing to be a witness to from the outside looking in, because it's almost like as an individual, if we're experiencing that, like I know what I need to do, but I don't know why I don't feel like it, or I don't know why I'm not in the mood. And I think that instead of beating ourselves up, we need to address the desire to continue to be intellectually challenged so that we're constantly feeling like we're moving towards something that represents enthusiasm and excitement and contribution and impact and legacy and all these things, right? And so I think it's a challenge for people to not want to just I always hear like, go back to the basics, go back to the fundamentals. And I'm like, no, 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 don't go back. Don't go backwards. Like everything that got you to where you are isn't necessarily going to get you where you're trying to go. And it's important to be seeking the clarity of purpose of where I want to go from here. I also appreciate you sharing that you had that limiting belief. I had to be big to go big. I've heard that a lot as people make the transition from residential investing into commercial. There's this imposter syndrome of, I'm stepping in to play with the big dogs or something like that. But at the end of the day, we're all just human beings who are on the journey of exploration and expansion. So I think it's incredible that you took that leap. I do have a question for you because a lot of people listening might currently be living in that residential space, either serving clients in the residential space or potentially investing in the residential arena, but not yet dipping their toes into commercial. What does it look like to make that next level leap where you were like, this was much bigger than anything else I had done before? How did you finance it? You mentioned needing to come up with 300,000. What does that even, what does creative financing even mean for someone listening that has no idea what that is?
So, creative financing really to me is anything outside of like your textbook type of, everybody thinks that, oh, you're going to buy an investment property, you have to put 20% down. And people think about things through that lens. And then they're like, well, they look at the order of magnitude of that and they're like, well, okay, well, I don't have $200,000 laying around to buy $1 million property. Um, I think that one of the things to get outside of the imposter syndrome is to really back at what you've done and really celebrate that win because everything that you've done it was new at some point in time. Fast forward a little bit. I mean, that office deal was, I was like, well, this thing's 16,000 square feet. I mean, I own a four-family property that's like 4,000 square feet. So like, this is just a little bit bigger and there's just a little bit more, there's maybe an extra comma that's on this relative to the other deal. Like, and I can do this. So I think that having encouragement and also surrounding yourself with people, and I know this is like very, very overused, like surround yourself with the right people. Okay. But the power in doing that is that you see that they're made out of the same flesh, blood, and bone that you are. And when you're hanging out with them and learning from them and contributing value to them, and just being, that proximity is power, that it's like you actually build the confidence yourself just by being surrounded by it. There's only a certain amount of confidence you're going to be able to really achieve by like listening to podcasts and getting all the technical education around, going to YouTube University and reading books and that sort of thing. You really need to hang out with those people that are like doing it like it's second nature, because if they have the confidence to do it and they're doing it as part of their second nature, then like, why can't you too?
I love that. You said overused, and we hear, I think it was Jim Rohn, you're the product of the five people you spend the most time with. So choose wisely. And I always say, hang out with people that remind you of your future. And you said
Mhm.
proximity is power. I wrote that down. I really love that. That might actually be the name of this podcast. But here's a question for you. How did you find the people that represent your future? How did you get in the room with them? Was it coaches? Was it communities? All of the above?
I was too uh I guess I had too much hubris and too much ego to hire a coach. So I mean I did everything the hard way. But what I did do is I started going to networking events to where there was going to be those types of people there, right? And really using my salesmanship on really just relationship building is how I built my real estate sales business. Like I was never the type like where hey, you got to adopt the ABC, ABCs of selling, like always be closing, that sort of thing. That wasn't my personality. So, but part of my personality is that I am genuinely curious about people. So, just having that childlike curiosity around those people that remind you of your future, for instance, is really kind of how I got my foot in the door. And you know, people generally like to feel good about people that are interested in them. Like it's like, be interested to be interesting. And so these conversations would lead to another connection, which led to another connection, which led to two more connections. And so this is kind of really how I built my network out. And these people that were sort of like totally foreign to me, totally intimidating to me, that ended up becoming my friends.
I don't know if I've ever shared this on the show, but when I was first starting out in the mortgage business, this is back in '07, '08, and before the market crash. So you could buy a house with stated income and stated assets. You didn't need to document anything. And my husband and I bought our first place in Denver for $95,000. And we ended up becoming accidental real estate investors and keeping the property when we stumbled upon the next house we wanted to buy before we had listed the first one. And I remember having clients at that time. I mean, when I say I was broke financially, I was, financial rock bottom at the beginning of my career. And I remember serving clients that totally intimidated me from the perspective of just seeing their net worth and knowing that they were so far ahead of me in the game that I almost felt embarrassed to be serving them with their mortgage needs until I realized I could apply curiosity. And I always say that curiosity squashes insecurity all day long. And I love that you said childlike curiosity because it kind of makes you smile to think about childlike curiosity, right? And sometimes we just need to lighten up and recognize that anyone that we consider to be ahead of the game, ahead of us in the game, they started somewhere too. And they also probably felt imposter syndrome and had insecurity and had to put themselves in the room with people that could lead them and grow together by association. And so instead of being intimidated by that, we can replace that with the curiosity. And so I would ask my clients, how did you do this? How did you get so many properties and how did you learn about it? And they would give me book recommendations and explain property management and things like that. And I ended up being able to level up through association, even with the clients I was serving. And I think that it's an important thing to explore because as human beings, we all experience that insecurity, self-doubt, limiting beliefs, right? Overwhelm. And there's nothing that makes us special in being human. Like you said, we're all the same flesh, blood and bones. I love that. So you talked earlier about, manifesting something. And I'm just kind of curious if there's any work that you do sort of from the inside out to improve upon your mindset, your belief systems. How do you get through that negative self-talk that could keep you stuck and running in circles? What does that look like for you on your journey?
I have to say it's a few different things. Obsession is definitely one thing that's a character trait of mine that is definitely a character flaw that I've had to learn how to leverage that to create the outcomes in the life that I desire. So that's one thing is just a visualization and obsession, thinking about it all the time. The building that we're in right now, for instance, was a result of a manifestation. We bought this 11-story high-rise, historic, beautiful Romanesque skyscraper. It was built in 1890. I thought about this property for like 5 years every day, and I drove by it. I imagined myself owning it and breathing new life into it, right? And if your listeners are actually like watching this somewhere, you're going to see me perspiring and that sort of thing. It's because we don't have proper HVAC in this building, but this is where we relocated our office to. And so it was just that that and then applying that obsession with the curiosity, right? So like seeing the for lease sign in the front window there, calling the broker, hey, can we get together? I'm super curious about the property you have listed there for lease and that sort of thing. And also doing a lot of stuff out in the community as well, with being very public facing is something that I've always seen magic in my life manifest when I'm out there doing good things, giving back, creating value for the community, and it creates this sort of like reputational like circular reference that the only reason we actually got this deal was not just because of my obsession, but also because people tend to want to check references, right? Whether you're renting an apartment or doing new business with somebody. And I wasn't the only person to make a run at this building. There's a lot of other people that made offers on it, and finally when the broker was talking about me, all four partners knew who I was and saw that I had a good reputation, saw that had the reputation to perform as well. So it was all the confluence of those factors working together. And then, curiosity involves humility. I can't stand sometimes when people go up on stage to accept an award and they say, "Oh, I'm so humbled by this award." I was like, "No, that's not that's not humility. Humility is actually going out there and being the dumb person." All right. So that's kind of like, those confluence of factors that kind of lead to the manifestation of things in my life that I desire.
I'm actually sitting in the home that I manifested the same exact way. I just looked at it every day, every day, every day until it went back off the market. And then I was able to buy it off market without any representation, saving, multiple six figures from what it was listed for the year prior when we lost out on the property. It's like we lost out on it, and I just did not move on. It's like, no, it's that is my house, you know. So I love that. And talk to us about, what's next for you. And, as you think towards the future and you're now achieving mastery in the development space and the investment space, and what does it look like for you to imagine giving back in the future? And what kind of education are you putting out there on your YouTube channel? I'm kind of curious about that too.
Yeah, so the next big thing for us is repositioning, or not repositioning, but redeveloping this building that we're currently in right now from historically it's been always an office building or business use into residential. So right now we're, back in, humble pie mode, right? We're basically starting a whole new journey. We have no idea around development projects of this or redevelopment projects of this size, how to put together the capital stacks on it. This is a property that qualifies for historic tax credits, and we've know enough to be dangerous, but not enough in the application of it. So, we hired a development consultant to act as an owner's rep for us to walk us through this project and help, and essentially say like, okay, this is the recipe, right? Do X, Y, and Z, like being told what to do. And for those of you people out there that are, working a W-2 and you're like, I don't like, I want to own my own business because I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. It's like, there's many days where I'm just like wake up and I'm just like, please, somebody, anybody, just tell me what to do, right? So we're going to be in the process of not just only reimagining this building, but we're in Four Corners in downtown Rochester. It's on the west side of the Genesee River, and this is an area that got completely annihilated post COVID because it's mostly office, and a lot of office that did end up surviving ended up moving out to the suburbs and outside of the city. So yes, there's a tremendous amount of challenges here, but there's also a great amount of potential for this area. So we've formed a coalition of building owners in concert with the state, the federal, our federal representatives, and also the city of Rochester to really put together a coalition to reimagine this entire district and being there, not just working on our project and thinking of it as an island, but trying to actually be a creative in forming an ecosystem that's going to reimagine this area and be something that like our kids will be really proud of walking around and having it part of their life in the future.
Oh, I love that. I love that big vision. And if folks want to find you, follow you, get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
I would say the first place to start is if you're looking to educate yourself on the commercial income property. I have a ton of long form educational stuff that's on my YouTube channel. So you mentioned it in the front there, in the front of the show, the Matt M. Drouin. I'm on all social platforms. I mean, this is part of like my job is to be public facing for our company, Oak Grove Development. And so, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere, and I'm very responsive and I'm an open book. There's no secrets or anything like that. So I'm happy to help anybody that is a listener of yours.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time and share your inspiring story. I hope the listeners are leaving here believing that they too can imagine a future for yourself and then go make it happen, allow it to happen, let it all in. And I just really appreciate your time today.
Hey, cheers. Thanks for having me on.
All right. To all my friends out there, thanks as always for tuning in. If you love this content and love the show, make sure to leave that 5-star review somewhere, wherever you're consuming it, because it continues to help us attract guests amazing as Matt Drouin and helps this content get found. So I love you. I appreciate you. We'll see you next time.